I sincerely welcome you, esteemed ladies and gentlemen, participants of the Global Peace Summit, which will take place on June 15-16 this year in Switzerland. I wanted to speak with you face to face, but unfortunately, I have not yet received confirmation of my registration for the summit, yet. It's likely that I won't be registered, as the truth is hard to hear, so I'm reaching out to you for help through social networks. I ask the viewers to share this, so that my message definitely reaches its intended recipients. My name is Roman Revedzhuk. I am a Ukrainian journalist, an ethnic Ukrainian, who cares deeply about the fate of my homeland. In June 2014, as a journalist, I gathered evidence of the crimes of the Russian Federation in the occupied territory of Donetsk, and upon returning, handed it over to the Ukrainian law enforcement agencies. I risked my own life for the sake of Ukraine. But unfortunately, circumstances were such that in 2020, I was forced to leave Ukraine to save my life. This was preceded by a change of power in Ukraine in 2019. After that, many things happened that you are not aware of. At that time, I clearly understood that Zelenskyy was a tragedy for Ukraine. I conducted investigations and published about Zelenskyy, or more precisely the Servant of the People project, a project that, according to my research, is implemented in Ukraine by Russian intelligence services. I hoped that the Ukrainian law enforcement agencies would do their job and prevent the worst from happening, but unfortunately, that did not happen. Due to the lack of independent media in Ukraine, I was unable to widely spread information. Today, the media are more controlled. Since my publications, many Ukrainians have been convinced by my words. From time to time, they recall my investigations. But sadly, we can no longer bring back the lives of hundreds of thousands of people. I was not the only one who had to leave Ukraine to save my life. We were saving our lives not from the invasion of the Russian Federation, but primarily from the actions of the authorities in Ukraine against us. Today, we are facing persecution through the dirtiest political manipulations hard for people from the democratic world to imagine. Zelenskyy's entourage uses the dirtiest propaganda techniques to turn Ukrainian society against people like me, who expose their lies and tell the truth to the people. Let me share a few episodes from my own experience. There is a major scandal in Ukraine as the head of the state media Ukrinform, under orders from Zelenskyy's office, compiled lists of undesirable speakers in the media. As mentioned, there are no independent media in Ukraine. In Ukraine, even the media practice of silencing those who speak the truth through a list called undesirable speakers has been and remains constant. In 2019, I was blacklisted on TV channels owned by Putin's crony Viktor Medvedchuk, and later I was blacklisted on TV channels owned by Petro Poroshenko. In 2020, on state media in the Russian Federation during prime time, they defended Zelenskyy and called for me to be imprisoned. You have to admit, it looked very strange. The media controlled by Zelenskyy and the Echo today have also blacklisted me. In 2022, journalist Anna Kornienko published my comment in support of Ukraine on the public broadcaster's website, but a few hours later, the central editorial office of this media deleted my comment. Such situations are common practice in Ukraine. Such situations. The authorities use the media to discredit and incite hostility among Ukrainians. This year, Zelenskyy's representatives added me and other Ukrainians speaking about corruption in Ukraine to the list of enemies. About the lies. When asked about the reasons for such decisions, Security Service of Ukraine stumbled over their words. This means that the state, in the hands of political fraudsters, commits crimes against its citizens in various ways and engages in discreditation in many forms. The authorities discredit not only the citizens of Ukraine, but also, for example, in 2022, using cunning technologies, they discredited U.S. Congresswoman Victoria Spartz. Last year, the official spokesperson of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, Anatoly Stefan, publicly suggested opening an account and raising funds to deal with me for sharing my thoughts about the then Commander-in-Chief of the Army, Zaluzhny. Do you think this spokesperson was fired? At the end of last year, the head of Ukrainian intelligence, Kirilo Budanov, empowered a citizen of another country to persecute me and other Ukrainians in territory of EU countries and nearby regions. In this case, an Israeli citizen, Boris Trykoman, who was detained by the criminal police of the Republic of Moldova at Chisinau Airport in 2023 and expelled from the country for a threat to national interests, as he was collaborating with the Shore Party, which is supported by Putin's party. And when this becomes known, instead of investigating, Zelenskyy awards Budanov with an order. And as for who Zelenskyy, Yermak, and other political frauds are, who tell you about democracy in meetings, I know personally better than anyone. In 2022, I was personally told that if I publicly praised Zelenskyy and did not criticize his entourage, my life would indeed actually improve. So, for the truth I speak, my life is in danger. But the truth is light. Therefore, I continue to bring light to the masses as long as the Lord allows me. So, let's speak frankly, ladies and gentlemen. In February 2022, the Russian Federation launched a full-scale invasion against Ukraine. I, along with other Ukrainians around the world, took to the streets with demonstrations to draw your society's attention to what is happening in Ukraine. We were saving our homeland as best as we could. Because when we talked about this since 2014, unfortunately we were not heard. Just like in January 2022, when I went to one of the main UN offices in the European Union and held a poster with large printed letters asking you, as leaders of states, nations, regions, and territories, to stop the Third World War and cease all business with the Russian Federation. Unfortunately, I was not heard then either. All of this is officially documented. You didn't want to believe us or listen to us while the Russian Federation was accumulating resources. The economic indicators of the Russian Federation grew the most after Joseph Biden came to power in the United States of America in 2021. Thank God you heard us after the first Moscow rockets hit Kyiv. I'm not criticizing you right now, just stating a fact. Because what has happened in Ukraine over the past decades is primarily the result of the inaction of the established political class in Ukraine, which we inherited from the times of the Soviet Union. If you think there are new politicians in Ukraine today, you are greatly mistaken. These are the children of old communist clans of non-Ukrainian origin who are interested in Ukraine solely for self-enrichment and opportunities. And it doesn't matter who is in power. Yesterday it was Poroshenko, today it's Zelenskyy, or tomorrow someone new, young, chosen by the oligarchs. Hairstyles and suits change, but mafia oligarchic clans remain in control. They deceive trusting Ukrainian people with corrupt media and propaganda, preventing independent politicians. I will repeat myself once more. I am not criticizing you. The situation in the country is the responsibility of our people for the lack of critical thinking. My people are too trusting and open, which makes them susceptible to populist slogans. But this definitely did not give the Russian Federation any grounds to come to the land of my homeland and kill my people. The war is definitely the responsibility of the Russian Federation. But I will say an unpopular phrase today, that in my opinion, this war will end when Moscow no longer has reliable partners in Kyiv and in a few other countries, including those countries. My Ukrainian people have stood in defense of Europe at various times. My people saved lives during the Holocaust at the cost of their own. My people have been subjected to genocides and famines. The Ukrainian nation lost more lives than any other nation in Europe during the First and Second World Wars. Now the genocide of my people is happening again. This must stop, and all of you have a real opportunity to stop it today. Similarly, we must pay attention to the genocide of the Palestinian civilian population in the Middle East. Therefore, I am reaching out to you for help. I am interested in real peace and real security for Ukraine. Zelenskyy is not who he claims to be. He is an actor playing a role and using the war in Ukraine for his own self-promotion. The role Zelenskyy plays is so exaggerated that he even dresses like a commander at international meetings with you to add to his stature. But I, as someone who knows the reality, remember the year 2014. At that time, I and other Ukrainians, risking our lives, were working to defend Ukraine, while Zelenskyy was personally playing along with Russian propaganda and hiding from mobilization. So I know exactly who Zelenskyy is, and when you hear an emotional speech from Zelenskyy, it's the work of stylists, political technologists, and a whole team of great political fraudsters. While the Ukrainian soldier in the trench lacks sufficient supplies, people close to Zelenskyy are dividing the next tranche of international aid among themselves and filling their pockets. Corruption is killing Ukraine. And those who talk about it are subjected to total censorship. Fake news is created against me and spread through government-controlled media. Official representatives of social networks TikTok, Facebook, and Instagram work with the authorities in Ukraine based on fabricated cases, restrict, block, and delete my profiles to silence me. A handful of small-minded people seek to completely subjugate the world. Another outrageous situation. Thousands of Ukrainian soldiers who stood up to defend Ukraine in the early days are being falsely accused in criminal cases and persecuted for speaking out about corruption. Many soldiers have already been thrown into prisons. Imagine the height of the climax. A year ago, a soldier named Tetiana Sidorenko contacted me after being thrown into prison for asking for medication as she fell ill. I am not exaggerating anything right now. I have her statement, and it's important to know that she voluntarily took up arms to defend Ukraine. Today, the situation in Ukraine is critical. We have a war with the Russian Federation, and within Ukraine, people have been driven to such despair by the authorities that a civil war could erupt any time. Zelenskyy and his entourage are using the war for their own interests. Zelenskyy has seized power in Ukraine and is essentially trying to become a dictator like Putin, only on a smaller scale. But if you, ladies and gentlemen, do not hear me today, then with your silent consent, something irreversible may happen. Right now, Zelenskyy is directly pushing you into this war, and in my opinion, he is doing it consistently in Putin's interests. According to my analysis, the plan of those people whose commands Putin and Zelenskyy are following is clear to me. This is a complete reformatting of the European Union and the creation of a new geopolitical paradigm, the forces of Beijing, Moscow, Berlin, and this won't come without bloodshed on the official lands of the EU. And the collapse of Europe will then be inevitable. This is exactly what autocrats strive for. Recall Zelenskyy's demonstrative provocation when he signed. This is not about foreign policy, but about turning Ukrainians against Europe. I'll say more. Tracking info from officials in Ukraine, it has become clear to me that there is a manipulative presentation of information to create a negative opinion among Ukrainians about international partners, the EU, NATO, and so on. At a time when there is a ban on men leaving Ukraine, this ban is absolutely unconstitutional. Male journalists close to the authorities, Ukrainska Pravda, travel abroad without any obstacles and, on commission, discredit other EU countries in the eyes of the Ukrainian public in their publications. And I'm not talking about constructive criticism, which is necessary for democracy, but about targeted manipulative informational context or even direct statements. At the same time, when the Russian Federation launched a full-scale invasion of Ukraine, the authorities did not fulfill the constitutional norm found in Article 106, Clause 19 of the Constitution of Ukraine. And this was done in the interests of the Russian Federation. Also, during Zelenskyy's presidency, the Ukrainian state has been occupied from within by Russian and other hostile agents. Zelenskyy, his view is a very limited person. There's nothing personal here, just observations based on the structure of his words, actions, and overall behavior. At the expense of Ukraine's sorrow, Zelenskyy speaks to you loudly, but these are only rehearsed phrases written for him by political technologists. Because deep down, Zelenskyy is a very bloodthirsty little man. He is just like Putin. Zelenskyy's lie about only 30,000 losses on the Ukrainian military side, when the real losses are hundreds of times greater. In May, Zelenskyy said in an interview that he doesn't want to be a liar, as he must protect the constitution of Ukraine. Also, he told Ukrainians that the constitution no longer works as he has put it on pause. What Zelenskyy is doing to my Ukrainian people during the war will one day be described as complicity in war crimes. If things continue like this in Ukraine, we, Ukrainians, fear losing our country. Many Ukrainians understand this. I have received numerous appeals from my compatriots on being oppressed by the authorities in Ukraine. We are between two shores. On one side is an external enemy, and on the other side the authorities in Ukraine are oppressing their own people. On one side, by telling you this, I will be accused of fueling Russian propaganda. On the other side, silence kills real people in Ukraine behind the front lines. We, Ukrainians, strive for a Ukrainian victory, but Zelenskyy and the overall political legacy currently in Ukraine are not the people with whom we can win. Furthermore, the worst part is that all of Zelenskyy's decisions today are invalid, because while I may not know international law very well, I do know Ukrainian law in this context. Zelenskyy indeed lost his legitimacy on May 21st. It's a paradox because you are meeting and sitting side by side with a person who speaks to you on behalf of my homeland as a president, but in fact, he no longer has the authority to do so. And in this, I see an even greater threat. By essentially accepting Zelenskyy at the official level from Ukraine, you are essentially doing something that cannot be undone later on, because Putin will use this very fact to justify his actions. Even in the event of escalation in EU countries, this will have consequences for both my country and yours. Therefore, I ask you, let us start talking about peace. But peace not at any cost. Peace to stop the bloodshed. For this, you will need to make some unpopular and difficult decisions. And I, along with my like-minded colleagues, am ready to offer you a mechanism for this. My contact information is with the President of Switzerland, to whom we sent an official request to participate in this summit. If you truly want real peace, then my experience and comprehensive analytical practice will help form the right strategy. There is also a need for a thorough and comprehensive audit and subsequent ongoing monitoring of the funds provided as international aid to Ukraine and the rationality of their use. For this, absolutely independent external experts who are perfectly familiar with Ukrainian realities are needed. I can also help with this. In December 2022, I presented the Fifth Universal. This is a plan for the revival of Ukraine. It is a new state-building model. This model can be integrated into the European security structure and will provide clear security guarantees for Ukraine. I hope you will hear me. And we will not waste time on the opportunity to stop the worst plan of the autocrats. Thank you for your attention. God bless Ukraine. God bless Europe. God bless the world.